Right guys, today we're going to be talking all about how you're not eating enough to grow. So as a ex-skinny guy myself, this video is for all of the skinny guys who are watching this and anyone who wants to put on a few extra pounds and grow. We're going to be talking all about how you're not eating enough. So one of the most important things, if you're struggling to gain weight, you class yourself as a hard gainer, you're training in the gym, you're pushing food down, but you're not growing, is quite simply that you have to eat for your needs, not for your appetite. If you are unfortunately one of those people who is in the state where they have a very small appetite, they don't like to eat a lot of food, they get full very quickly. In order to gain weight, you are going to need to eat more than you want to. You're going to need to find a way to eat more than your body says that you need to. So the estimate that you have in your head of how much you're eating, even when you are reaching that fullness, you're filling out, you're eating when you're hungry, you've matched your appetite to your intake, you are still estimating how much you've eaten and you are under eating. This could be due to improper tracking or just an underestimation in how much you eat. And therefore, the only way you're going to need to do this to make progress is to eat for your needs. And if your body needs a calorie surplus of, let's say, you need to eat 3,000 calories a day and you're eating 2,000 and you're overestimating how much you eat, you think you're eating 3,000, you're only eating 2,000, you're never going to make those gains. You might be full all the time, you might think you're forcing down food, but if you're not eating to your needs, you're just eating to your appetite and you're underestimating the amount you eat, you are not going to grow. So that's going to leave you with two questions. How much should you eat and how do you eat that much? And is there an exact number or a calculation we can do with your body weight, your stats, your measurements, your activity levels to find the exact amount you need to grow? Unfortunately, the answer is no. It is all very individual and very dependent on that individual. Some people's NEAT, their non-exercise activity thermogenesis, is very high due to work, the fact they're very active, always tapping their feet, always moving around. Some people's TDEE, total daily energy expenditure, is incredibly high because they do lots of work in the gym, lots of work in their jobs. They could be working labor, they could be getting in 20-something thousand steps a day, still going to the gym, and they are burning through those calories. So the question then goes, how much do you eat? How much to eat? How much should you eat? It's quite simple, really. You need to eat as much to get those scales to go up by 0.25% to 0.5% of your total body weight per week. So for ease of example, if you weigh 100 kilos, you would like to be gaining 500 grams a week or half a kilo week on week on week. How much to eat to generate that much gain? Half a kilo, let's be easy with these numbers, is going to be 1 pound. How much is a pound as a surplus? That's going to be about 3,500 calories. So if you wanted to gain that much, you'd be looking at maybe a 500 calorie surplus a day. That would be for somebody who is 100 kilos, looking at gaining a pound in a week, or half a kilo in a week, if we just round those numbers and make life easy. So if you're not in that boat, you're not in that 100 kilo club, you might be a lot smaller. Let's say you're only 50 kilos, run that calculation again, looking at gaining 0.25% to 0.5% of your total body weight per week, and then get that number. 1 pound of gain is going to be about 3,500 calories. Where do you fall on that spectrum? And that 3,500 number is coming from the amount we need to gain a pound of fat in a surplus. So in actuality, that number can be much, much lower. We only need a very slight surplus to gain a pound of muscle or a pound of tissue. Contractile tissue doesn't require as much energy to gain as stored fat does on our body. So if we look at running that calculation, instead of just saying gaining a pound of weight or half a kilo of weight, we look at more half a kilo of good weight, scale weight aside. We're still going to be gaining half a kilo roughly, but we could be taking that surplus right the way down. And instead of saying we need a 3,500 calorie surplus to generate this weight, let's go half that and say we need 1,750 calorie surplus. So that 100 kilo man would only need a 250 calorie surplus each day. So I'll throw some numbers up on there and make that a little bit easier to understand. So if we're looking at gaining 0.25 to 0.5% of your body weight each week, would we think we need 3,500 calories to generate a pound of mass on our body? So we divide that by 7, we'd get the daily surplus that we need. We'd then track our calories, we'd follow that scale, and we'd somehow find our maintenance, and therefore we'd find where our surplus is. That would be a great way to gain weight, but we are interested in growing, not only just heavier, we want big muscles. So how do we generate that 1 good pound as opposed to just 1 pound of scale weight, which could be fat, it could be water, it could be glycogen, it could be a bit of muscle. What we really want is to gain as much muscle as we can, as little fat as we can, and that water and that glycogen are just going to be byproducts pie for the course. So 1 good pound is not going to require 3,500 calories. The energy demand to lose fat and to gain fat does not correlate directly with the energy demand to lose muscle or gain muscle. Gaining muscle does not require a massive surplus. As I said before, you might need a 500 calorie surplus daily to gain a pound a week. You do not need a 500 calorie surplus daily to gain muscle. So when we're looking at saying we're in the hard gainer territory, that does not mean we need to be in the 500 calorie daily surplus territory. This is definitely a great way to gain weight, but it's a great way to get over fat very quickly. What we want to grow, to go from under eating and staying small to getting big, is a long runway, plenty of time to grow, gradually improve, progressively overload in the gym, make progress in our performance, grow those muscles that way. And the best way to get around doing that is to gain 1 good pound at a time with a much smaller surplus than this 3,500 calories for 1 pound, or that daily surplus of 500 calories to gain that 1 pound. I myself personally am in about 100 calorie surplus each day from my maintenance, and that is plenty enough to grow slowly over time. That's very conservative. You could go somewhere between that 100 calorie to 250 calorie daily surplus, and you'll be having all the extra energy you need to fuel that performance and to grow. So we've got that 100 calorie to 250 calorie surplus for the day locked in. How do we eat that much? And how do we eat that much even if and even when we're not hungry? This is pretty much the part everyone's struggling with. Working out the calories you need to eat total for your body is going to be a case of a bit of trial and error, finding where that scale moves, getting to a point where it chugs up nice and slowly, chuggers along, and you're not shooting up kilos a week, and you're not completely stalling and stagnant. It's just a little trial and error, find that right number. For different people, it's different. For different days of the week, people's energy expenditure is different. So you might have a really active day and then a few rest days. So you're looking at more of that weekly moving average as opposed to that daily average, because if you've got some very busy days, some very quiet days, averages out week on week, you will need a weekly calorie intake as opposed to a daily calorie intake. So you just work on that number and building that average up. But when you get to that point where you need to eat in the surplus, you are going to be eating possibly beyond your appetite to your needs. How do you manage that? One of the most important things is to have big meals already locked in. We're going to call these anchor meals. These are meals that you can repeat consistently each day of the week, each week of the month, each month of the year, that you can always have sort of like your staple meals in your diet that get in a lot of your calories for the day, easily, conveniently. You can always have them at hand. Those sorts of things, meals where we can always hit a big chunk of our calories for the day. And then for the rest of the day, we can look at throwing in the rest of the meals with what we want. And if we get these big meals in, we eat them down. They might be a bit too much. They might be slightly over the point of comfortable to eat, but they're exactly what we need to grow. So let's come up with some examples of some anchor meals we can have to consistently gain some size. So our anchor meals are going to be high calorie repeatable meals. And if we can have 1 to 2 reliable, dense anchor meals in a day, each and every day, we'll be able to easily get our calories in, reach that surplus, eat beyond our appetite. So for me personally, what are my anchor meals? What sort of meals do I always have that I can flush down, eat really quickly? They don't sit on the stomach too much. They're not going to make me full throughout the rest of the day. And they're going to easily be able to get in lots and lots of calories, especially if we're looking at that peri-workout window. This is where those anchor meals can come in handy, pre-workout, intra-workout and post-workout, especially calories intra-workout that we drink. They definitely don't sit on our stomach. They definitely don't make us any fuller. So they keep us hungry, able to eat more, able to eat past our appetite to our needs to generate that surplus. So one of my favorite ways to make an anchor meal is quite simply to make lots of rice. If I get my rice cooker on I get rice in the fridge, lots of big portions of rice. I know how much a portion of rice is for me to make my surplus. It might be different for you, but if I mix that rice with some whey, some fruit and some honey, I've got myself a banging pre-workout meal. Plenty of protein, plenty of carbs, plenty of sugars, get me ready to train. Absolutely no fats. The problem with fats is that they're filling and satiating, so we can't eat as much of them if we don't have them in the meal, and especially peri-workout. I talk about it all the time, pre, intra, post. We don't want any fats around that window anyway, so this is a perfect way to get a big pre-workout bowl of rice pudding in. And if we've got that rice cooked or not, we can instead have rice and some white meat and some veggies, maybe have some fruit and some honey on the side. This way, if you've got that meat cooked instead, you don't need to resort to that whey protein. You don't need to make that rice pudding. You can instead quite simply have some rice, some white meat that's not very filling, barely touches the sides of the stomach, and some veggies and some honey to help with that digestion. It's lovely if you like pineapple with that sort of food. Fruits as well on the side. Sugar doesn't fill you up at all. Great for those calories, pre, intra, post. Marvelous stuff. And if you're looking at getting loads of calories in, rice or oats, as I've said. So if this is not a pre-workout meal or a post-workout meal, this is your breakfast. You can easily make an anchor meal out of having oats, whey, fruit, honey, and maybe some form of nut butter, nuts and seeds. You could have peanut butter, you could have almond butter, or you could just have nuts on top as a little topping. Get some fats in there for your breakfast. That would be a great way to fill you up a little bit, get energy sustained throughout the day, but get in a boatload of calories from those oats or those rices. Sometimes my breakfast will be rice, oats, whey, fruit, honey, bosh, everything mixed up. If I've got some yogurt in the house as well, throw that in there, throw that whey out, because sometimes I prefer whey, sometimes I prefer yogurt. Depends what kind of mood we're in. Before bed, yogurt's a little bit better than whey in my opinion. So if that meal comes before bed, throw that yogurt in instead of that whey. If it's pre-workout, throw that whey in instead of that yogurt. But that is my favorite sort of anchor meal. Cooking a bunch of rice, having a bunch of rice in the fridge, all portioned out, ready to go. I can easily throw meat with it, cook meat with it, have veggies and fruit with it, or I can just mix whey with it, mix in fruit and veg, honey, boom, pre-workout made, and you're ready to go. It's really simple, it's really easy. It barely touches the side of your stomach. So if you eat a couple of meals like that every day, and then a couple of your regular meals, you'll easily be able to get those calories way up there without feeling too stuffed. So, caveat to this, eating more does mean that we are going to need to train harder. When we train harder, we are going to get hungrier. We're going to get hungry. It's going to make eating more just that little bit easier. But food needs to be used as performance. It needs to be used for performance. It needs to be fuel for our performance, our gym, our lifts. So pre, intra and post, we need lots of food to fuel that performance, to keep us going in the gym and to aid with that recovery and that super compensation, get us back glycogenated, recovering after our workout. Our food does not need to help us go to sleep. It doesn't need to make us happy. It doesn't need to do all of these regular things. If we're looking at optimizing performance and getting perfection, we don't need loads and loads of carbohydrates before we go to bed because we're going to sleep. We don't need the energy that part of the day. So even if you are struggling to get this food in, it doesn't mean you need to cram in a bunch of food before you go to bed. Our food still needs to focus on training harder and fueling that performance. If we're eating more and that isn't actually helping our performance, as in we go from eating 2,500 calories to 3,000 calories, but we're lifting the same in the gym, this isn't optimal. This isn't going to help us progressively overload. This is just going to put more weight on our frame, not in a good way. We're looking at growing muscle and getting big slowly over time. Years and years, consistent progress. You go from being skinny to slightly less skinny, to slightly less skinny, to slightly less skinny, to eventually there's a point you break even and you get big. So that's what we need to do. We need to eat to fuel our training performance, not just to get as much food in as we can to reach that surplus. So not only are we eating to our needs, we are eating, and what we need to do with that need, with that surplus, is fuel performance. And we're going to have to eat past our appetite if we're a hard gainer, if we're just one of those people that isn't hungry. One of the absolute most important things you need to do is track your calories. If you're skinny, if you think you're a hard gainer, if you think you can't put size on, you're probably underestimating your calorie intake. If you're tracking your calories properly, scanning the backs of the packets, getting the right things, the right ingredients on that app, measuring things with a scale, not eyeballing it and guessing it, we are actually properly tracking our calories. We will not underestimate the amount we eat. we'll be able to properly find ourselves a surplus that we need to get ourselves into in order to grow. So to sum up how we're going to get that size on, how we're going to eat to grow, eat past our appetite, we're going to need to track our calories. We're going to need to aim for a 0.25 to 0.5% body weight gain per week. And we're going to use and make anchor or staple meals to get in big loads of food that don't sit in our stomach, that don't fill us up pre, intra, post workout. As many as we can, as much as we can. We need to do whatever it takes to get that scale to move. And it's quite simple. If that scale isn't going up, you need to eat more. So if you're not gaining and you're not growing, you need to do two simple things. You need to eat more food and you need to subscribe to this channel. Like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell. Don't miss another video. Let me know what you think about this video, how you struggled to gain weight, how you've managed to gain weight, if you've gone from skinny to big like myself. I'll see you guys all in the next one. So peace.